A lonely millionaire hires a young pregnant woman to care for his blind and disabled son. But one day, when he unexpectedly returns home, he realizes that something is wrong in the silence of the home. As he climbs the stairs, he comes across a disturbing scene that he never imagined he would witness. What he discovers at that moment changes not only his view of the maid, but also the course of his entire family. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the Yaziansa channel, like this video and comment on where you are watching from. Camilla Mueller looked at her reflection in the foggy mirror of the small bathroom. The deep circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights, and her trembling hand rested on her 7-month belly. She took a deep breath, trying to gather what was left of her dignity. The rented room, with its peeling walls and a window that barely closed, was all she had left after Hugo disappeared upon finding out about her pregnancy. "You can do it," she muttered to herself, straightening the only presentable dress that still fit her. Her nursing degree, which had once been a source of pride, now felt like a dusty diploma hanging on the wall of a future that never came. Her last 6 job interviews had ended the same way. Uncomfortable glances at her belly, and that rehearsed. Line will be in touch. The newspaper spread out on the bed showed an ad circled in red: wanted full-time caregiver, room and board included, experience with teenagers desirable. Hope, that stubborn force that resists even when everything seems lost, made Camilla put the newspaper in her worn-out bag. Maybe it was her last chance before her savings ran out completely. The bus swayed as it headed toward an old part of the city where century-old mansions stood the test of time. Camilla got off at the indicated stop, feeling the weight of her pregnant body as she walked through tree-lined streets that seemed to transport her to another world, far from the cramped apartments of the city center. As she turned the corner, she stopped, impressed. The Anderson Mansion, as the discreet sign on the high wall indicated, was an imposing building of stone and fine wood, with ornate windows and a garden that, even partially visible, betrayed constant care. The wrought-iron gate looked like a door to another time. Camilla took a deep breath, fixed her brown hair and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed as if it traveled through infinite corridors. Seconds later, a camera above the intercom moved in her direction. "Yes?" A dry, formal female voice sounded over the intercom. "Good morning, I'm Camilla Mueller. I came for the job interview about the caregiver vacancy." There was a long silence before the gate slid silently open, allowing them to enter. The stone path to the front door was lined with carefully pruned flowers, creating a disturbing contrast. So much beauty arranged around a house that, seen up close, carried an undeniable air of melancholy. At the door, a woman of about 60, with grey hair tied in a perfect bun and an erect posture, was waiting for her. Her impeccable uniform and analytical gaze made Camilla feel inadequate, even before she said a word. "I'm Teresa, the housekeeper. Mr. Anderson will see you in the library. Please follow me." Her voice was the same as the one on the intercom, practical, matter-of-fact, as if every wasted word were a professional failing. Camilla followed her down a hallway with wooden floors that creaked subtly under her footsteps. The walls were decorated with landscape paintings and family portraits that seemed to be watching her suspiciously. The air had a peculiar scent: old books, polished wood, and something else, perhaps melancholy, if that feeling had a scent. The library was a large room with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes. A circular staircase led to the higher shelves. In the center, near a dead fireplace, a man sat in a dark leather chair, leafing through a book. "Miss Camilla Mueller, sir," Teresa announced, with a discreet bow before leaving, closing the heavy door behind her. Raphael Anderson stood up with calculated movements. He was tall, with grey hair at his temples contrasting with the predominant dark brown. He was dressed with discreet elegance: dress pants, a linen shirt, and a wristwatch. That, even from a distance, Camilla recognized as a valuable piece. His green eyes were intense, but they carried a permanent sadness, as if they had seen too much of life. "Miss Mueller, please sit down." His voice was low and controlled, indicating the seat in front of hers. Teresa informed me that you came. By the announcement. Camilla nodded, carefully settling in. Yes, I saw it in yesterday's paper. I'm a registered nurse with experience in general care and— You're pregnant, he interrupted, not as a question but as a statement as he sat back down. Yes, I'm in my 7th month. Camilla took a deep breath, bracing herself for yet another rejection. I understand if that's a deal-breaker. To her surprise, Raphael just watched her for a few moments, as if evaluating not just her physical condition, but something deeper. The position is to take care of my son, Daniel. Raphael folded his fingers in his lap. He's 15 years old, and a little over a year ago, he lost his sight in an accident. Since then, he's refused to adapt to his new condition. The last 3 caregivers didn't stay more than 2 weeks. Camilla felt a lump in her throat. Is he in the process of rehabilitation? It should be. Raphael stood up, walking to the window. Daylight illuminated his austere profile. Daniel refuses any professional help. He abandons therapies, ignores medical instructions, isolates himself in his room. Sarcasm has become his main language. Camilla realized that there was more to that story. Pain accumulated between the lines, guilt perhaps, and that feeling that the entire house seemed to carry an unresolved mourning. The position includes living in an attached room to the main house, all meals, 1 day off per week, and a market-competitive salary. Raphael turned to her. Your responsibilities would be to supervise Daniel full-time, encourage his independence, ensure he follows the recommended exercise routine, and most importantly, try to bring him back into the world. There was a silent plea in those words, not just that of a job opening being filled, but that of a desperate father seeking to save his son. Would you like to meet him before we decide? Raphael asked. Camilla hesitated for just a second before answering, Yes, I would love to. As they walked down the hallway, Raphael explained in a low voice. After the accident, Daniel rebuilt his room as a kind of sensory fortress. We moved some of the furniture around to make it easier for him to get around, but he prefers to keep to himself most of the time. They stopped at a door where a discreet sign read, Knock and wait. I may be purposefully ignoring you. Raphael knocked 3 times and announced, Daniel, I have brought someone to meet you. The answer came after several seconds of silence. If you're just another specialist in making blind people happy, you can send her away. My quota of false empathy is exhausted for the month. Camilla couldn't help but smile in surprise at the sharp response. There was intelligence and pain in that sarcasm, a combination she knew well. She's a candidate for the position of caregiver, Raphael replied with patience that clearly came from practice. Her name is Camilla. More silence then. Come, and let's get this over with. Raphael opened the door, revealing a large, peculiarly arranged room. The walls, painted a deep blue, contrasted with light furniture. There were sophisticated audio systems, shelves with objects organized by texture, and a bed positioned so that it received natural light from the window, an irony for someone who could not see it. Sitting in an armchair in the corner, headphones hanging around his neck, was Daniel. He was a thin teenager with messy brown hair and a defensive posture. His hazel eyes moved unfocused around the room. Beside the armchair rested a folding cane that looked like it had never been used. Daniel, so this is Camilla Müller, Raphael introduced. The boy tilted his head slightly as if listening beyond the words. Let me guess, another retired nurse needing extra money to support cats? Camilla smiled, realizing the test behind the teasing. Actually, I'm a newly qualified nurse, 7 months pregnant, catless, and in need of a place to start over. Daniel's face registered genuine surprise. He clearly hadn't expected such frankness. For an instant, the mask of indifference fell. The silence that followed Camilla's revelation was broken by the sound of a short, dry laugh. Pregnant? That's new. Daniel shifted in his chair, his expression wavering between curiosity and suspicion. At least you're honest. The others tried to convince me that they were here because they loved the challenge of working with special needs kids. He made air quotes with his fingers, a precise gesture for someone who couldn't see. Camilla noticed how Raphael watched, the interaction with a mixture of surprise and restrained hope. There was something in the way the man looked at his son, a deep pain that spilled over into every tiny gesture. "I don't believe in challenges, only in adaptations," Camilla replied, approaching cautiously. "Can I sit?" Daniel gestured vaguely toward a nearby chair. "Make yourself comfortable. How long will it last? The last one lasted 9 days. I'm betting on a week for you." "Daniel," Raphael warned in a tired voice. Camilla sat up, instinctively, placing her hand on her stomach. "I think you're going to lose this bet." An almost imperceptible smile appeared on the corner of the teenager's lips. "We'll see." There was something about the atmosphere, in that room, a combination of challenge and possibility, that made Camilla feel for the first time in months that perhaps there was a purpose beyond survival in her life. 3 hours later, Camilla returned to her rented room to collect her belongings. The decision had been made surprisingly quickly. Raphael insisted that she move in that day, showing her the rooms where she would be staying, a small apartment attached to the main house, with a bedroom, bathroom, and a small living room. The space, although modest compared to the rest of the mansion, was infinitely more comfortable than her current room. "I don't have much to bring," Camilla explained, when Raphael offered to let the driver help her. "I can fit everything in a suitcase, and a few boxes." As she packed her few belongings, Camilla allowed herself to feel something she had avoided for months, hope. Maybe there, in this strange house with broken people, she could finally find a place to rebuild her life. Upon returning to the mansion early in the evening, Teresa received her with the same formality as in the morning, but Camilla noticed a slight softening in her gaze. "Dinner will be served at 8, the housekeeper informed him. "Mr. Raphael prefers punctuality. As for young Daniel, he rarely shows up for family meals. You may take a tray to his room if he refuses to come down." Camilla nodded, beginning to understand the dynamics of that house. Meals were solitary moments. For Raphael, frustrated attempts to maintain a family normality that no longer existed. "Any specific recommendations on how to deal with him?" Camilla asked as she accompanied Teresa to her quarters. The housekeeper paused for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. Daniel wasn't always like this. Before the accident, he was a bright boy, full of plans. Her eyes seemed to soften momentarily. Life here was different. There was music, visitors, laughter. She resumed her professional demeanor. Now, silence seems to be the only constant. What exactly happened? "It is not my place to tell this story. Miss Camilla, ask Mr. Raphael if you think it is appropriate." Teresa paused before adding, "Just know that there are wounds here that go beyond the boy's eyes." After organizing her belongings in her new room, Camilla decided to start her work immediately. Walking down the silent hallway, she knocked on Daniel's door. "If it's my father, I'm sleeping. If it's Teresa, I've already taken my medicine. If it's the new caregiver, I'm counting the minutes until you give up," came the reply. Camilla smiled, opening the door. "It's me, and I haven't even started working officially yet, for you to already be trying to fire me." Daniel was lying on the bed, headphones hanging around his neck. His face turned towards Camilla's voice. "You smell different," he commented. "The others smelled like cheap perfume and disinfectant. You smell like, I think it's lavender." Camilla was surprised by the observation. "Lavender oil. I use it to calm anxiety." "Are you anxious now?" "A little. First days are always weird." Daniel shifted in bed, sitting up. "Why did you take the job? Pregnancy must make it hard to take care of a troubled teenager." "Who said you're a problem?" Camilla approached, noticing how the room was organized to make it easier for the boy to move around. "And to answer your question, I need the job, the housing, and I believe we can help each other." "How could I help you?" Camilla thought for a moment. "Maybe teaching me patience. I'll need it when my baby arrives." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just contemplative. Camilla took the opportunity to take a closer look around. There were books in Braille that seemed untouched, a sophisticated sound system, and on the walls posters of bands and some paintings that were clearly from before the accident. "Can't you read Braille yet?" she asked, indicating the books, remembering moments later that he couldn't see the gesture. "I'm not interested," Daniel replied dryly. "I prefer audiobooks." Understandable. It must be hard to learn a completely new language. Camilla sat down in the chair next to the bed. "What were you listening to before I arrived?" "The Catcher in the Rye, for the third time this month. A classic on social maladjustment, appropriate." Daniel smiled in surprise. "You read it?" "Yes, in college. Holden Caulfield, The Eternal Nonconformist." "It's comforting," Daniel confessed in a rare moment of vulnerability, "to know that someone has felt as out of place as I have." Camilla allowed the silence to settle in again, realizing that she didn't need to fill every moment with words. Sometimes the best way to communicate was to simply be present. "I'd like to establish a routine tomorrow," he said finally. "Not to control you, but to create some predictability. I don't need routines. I'm perfectly comfortable in my organized chaos." "The routine isn't just for you. It's for me too," Camilla explained. "Soon I won't be able to make sudden movements or stand for long periods of time. We need to find a rhythm that works for both of us." The honesty seemed to disarm Daniel momentarily. "What kind of routine do you suggest?" "Breakfast at 8. Some light physical activity in the morning, perhaps a walk in the garden. In the afternoon we can explore other activities, reading, music, or whatever interests you. The important thing is to set a purpose for each day." "What if I refuse?" Camilla considered the question. "Then I'm going to sit here and describe in detail how my belly moves when the baby kicks, until you beg to leave the room." To his surprise, Daniel laughed, a genuine, disarming sound that seemed like it hadn't been heard in that house for a long time. "You're different," he concluded, tilting his head as if studying Camilla beyond his vision. "Less pious. It's refreshing." From that night on, something subtle began to change in the Anderson mansion. Camilla didn't impose dramatic transformations, but rather small adjustments that gradually created new patterns. She convinced Daniel to have breakfast on the balcony instead of in his room. She rearranged objects to facilitate his independence. And most importantly, she never treated his blindness as a tragedy, only as a reality to be adapted to. For the first few days, Raphael watched from afar, with cautious skepticism. During dinner, as they ate in silence at the imposing dining table, he finally asked, "How are you adapting?" Camilla smiled, helping herself to a portion of salad. "We're negotiating. Daniel agreed to try a walk in the garden tomorrow, and I promised not to insist on Braille for now." Raphael looked genuinely surprised. "He agreed to leave the room. With conditions, of course. We'll have to do it before the house wakes up to avoid looks of pity, as he says." A silence fell, but Camilla realized it wasn't the usual emptiness. There was something hopeful about it. Slowly, Raphael put down his fork and looked at her intently. "What did you tell him?" "How did you achieve what no professional has achieved in months?" Camilla thought for a moment. "I didn't say anything out of the ordinary. I just didn't try to pretend that I understood what he was going through. I think Daniel is tired of people trying to fix something that can't be fixed. His life has changed, and he needs to figure out how to navigate this new reality, in his own time." Raphael looked at her with a look that Camilla couldn't fully decipher. There was gratitude, certainly, but also something more complex, perhaps admiration. "This house has been silent for too long," he said almost to himself. "Sometimes I wonder if—" He didn't finish the thought, but Camilla felt that she had touched something deep, a wound that went beyond Daniel's accident, something buried in the foundations of that imposing, sad house. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Camilla knocked softly on Daniel's door. "It's time for our deal," he announced. "The garden awaits." To his surprise, Daniel was already awake and dressed. Beside the bed, his cane, until then an ignored accessory, was in his hands. "Let's get this over with," he said, but Camilla could tell there was none of the usual hostility in his voice. As they walked slowly down the hallway, Camilla noticed how Daniel's every step was carefully calculated. His pride kept him from showing insecurity, but his fingers gripped the cane with unnecessary force. "The garden has a stone path that circles the entire property," Camilla explained. "Teresa told me that you helped design it a few years ago." Daniel made an indistinct sound, somewhere between confirmation and discomfort. "It was a school project, landscaping and architecture. I wanted to be an architect." The use of the past tense didn't go unnoticed by Camilla. She wanted to say something comforting, but she knew that words of consolation would sound hollow. Instead, she offered her silent presence as they walked outside, toward a world Daniel had refused to face for over a year. As the cool morning air enveloped them and the first rays of sunlight warmed their skin, Camilla noticed a subtle change in the boy's posture. There was tension, yes, but also a cautious curiosity, as if, even without seeing it, he was rediscovering something long lost. The days at the Anderson mansion began to take on a new rhythm. Morning walks with Daniel became a daily ritual, gradually expanding in distance and duration. Camilla noticed how the teenager, initially reluctant, now looked forward to these moments with an anticipation that he tried unsuccessfully to disguise. Ensui. A particularly sunny morning 3 weeks after their arrival, they took a different path through the garden, arriving at a more secluded area of the property. "This was my favorite place," Daniel commented, his cane gently tapping the outline of a wooden bench positioned beneath a leafy tree. "I haven't been here since—" He didn't finish the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Camilla watched as his fingers slid over the aged wood, as if trying to recover memories through touch. "What were you doing here?" Camilla asked, carefully sitting down next to him. Daniel took a deep breath before answering. "I drew projects, blueprints, ideas for houses I wanted to build one day." His voice carried a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness. "Ironic, isn't it? An architect who can't see." "Architecture is not just about seeing," Camilla replied softly. "It's about spaces, sensations, functionality. You can still feel all of that." Daniel turned to him. "You always have an optimistic answer, don't you?" "It's not optimism, it's pragmatism. I'm just stating facts." A faint smile appeared on the boy's lips. "My mother used to say something similar. She was direct." It was the first time Daniel had mentioned his mother. Camilla felt she had touched on delicate but important territory. "Your mother? Doesn't she live here?" Daniel's face hardened instantly. "She left when I was 8. She never came back. Not a letter, not a phone call. She just decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore." The revelation fell heavily between them. Camilla understood in that moment that abandonment was a wound even deeper than blindness, an invisible scar that shaped Daniel's distrust of the world. "I'm sorry," Camilla said, knowing the words were inadequate. "Don't be." She made a choice. Daniel stood up abruptly. "I think we've had enough physical activity for today. I want to go back." On the way back to the house, the silence between them was different, laden with unspoken revelations and unasked questions. Camilla realized that there was more to the Anderson family's story than just her mother's abandonment and Daniel's accident. There were secrets buried in that property, secrets that seemed to whisper through the mansion's hallways. Later that day, while Daniel was resting, Camilla found Teresa organizing the kitchen pantry. The housekeeper worked meticulously, labeling jars and organizing food with the precision of someone who knew every inch of that house. "Can I help you with anything?" Camilla offered. Teresa gave him a quick glance. "Everything is under control." "Thank you." Camilla observed the woman for a few moments. "Teresa, how long have you worked here?" 23 years, the housekeeper replied without interrupting her work. "I arrived when Daniel was not even a project yet." "So you met his mother." Teresa's hands paused for a moment, almost imperceptibly, before continuing their task. "Yes, I did. Mrs. Sophia, a complex woman. Daniel told me she abandoned them." Teresa closed the closet door and looked directly at Camilla. "Mrs. Sophia did leave. The circumstances, well, it's not for me to judge." "What happened?" The housekeeper sighed, seeming to weigh her words. There were problems. The marriage wasn't exactly what she'd hoped for. Raphael had always been dedicated to his work, and Sophia, she needed more attention, validation, freedom. She just left her own son? People make difficult choices when they feel suffocated, Miss Camilla. Teresa instinctively adjusted her apron. But there is more to this story than meets the eye. Mr. Raphael never completely got over it. Her departure changed him, and when the accident happened to Daniel, it was as if fate had decided that this family had suffered enough. Camilla could tell there was genuine pain in the housekeeper's words, not just the loyalty of a maid, but the affection of someone who had witnessed a family fall apart. The accident. How exactly did it happen? Teresa looked away. A car accident. Daniel was with friends coming back from a party. The driver lost control and... She paused. Daniel was the only one who suffered permanent damage. The guilt consumes Mr. Raphael. He believes that if he had been more present, more attentive... It wasn't his fault, Camilla observed. Guilt is rarely about facts, miss. It's a feeling that feeds on what-ifs. That night, during dinner, Camilla noticed how Raphael seemed more tired than usual. There was a tension in his shoulders, a distraction in his gaze that suggested concerns beyond the daily routine. Did something happen? Camilla asked as Teresa served dessert. Raphael seemed surprised by the direct question. Problems at work, nothing important. Daniel mentioned that you used to draw together. He showed you the bench in the garden today. The mention caused something to light up in Raphael's tired gaze. He took you there. Camilla nodded. He told me about the projects he designed. It felt nostalgic. Daniel had a natural talent for architecture, Raphael said, his voice softening. Ever since he was little, he watched how I worked, asked questions, created his own plans. I imagined that one day he would take over the office. He still can, Camilla suggested. There are successful blind architects. Raphael looked at her with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. Do you really believe that? I believe that limits are there to be redefined, not to hold us back. A contemplative silence hung between them. Finally, Raphael spoke. Tomorrow is Daniel's birthday, 15. He hesitated. Usually that day passes like any other. He's refused to celebrate since the accident. Maybe we can do something simple, Camilla suggested. Nothing fancy, just an acknowledgement. He'll probably refuse. Maybe, but offering the choice is a gift in itself. The next morning, Camilla found a small package on her doorstep, a carefully wrapped box with a note from Raphael. To help with Daniel. Thanks for trying. Inside was a family photo album, showing moments from Daniel's childhood, including pictures with his mother. The photographs revealed an untold story. Sophia was a beautiful woman, with a reserved smile and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something beyond the frame. In some images, she seemed genuinely happy with her young son. In others, especially the most recent ones, there was an unsettling melancholy in her gaze. Camilla leafed through the album carefully, trying to understand the complexity of that family through the images frozen in time. On the last page, a loose photo caught her eye. Sophia next to a man who was not Raphael, both smiling in front of a mountainous backdrop. On the back, a date and a brief note. Vacation with Matteo, do not show to R. Intrigued, Camilla kept the photograph separately. There was something about that image, about Sophia's relaxed expression, that contrasted sharply with the others in the album. Who could Matteo be, and why should that photo be hidden from Raphael? Before she could think about it any further, Camilla heard knocking on her door. It was Teresa, with a worried expression. Daniel is refusing to leave his room. Today, not even for his morning walk. Camilla was already expecting this. I'll talk to him. As she approached Daniel's room, Camilla noticed that the door was ajar. Something unusual. From inside, the sound of low classical music came. She knocked softly. Can I come in? It's practically in, Daniel replied, his voice less hostile than Camilla had expected. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed casually, his fingers tapping to the rhythm of the music. Camilla noticed that beside him was a small open box. "I know today is a day you'd rather ignore," she began, sitting down next to him, "but I brought you something. I don't want any presents. It's not really a gift. It's more a proposal." Camilla placed a small object in Daniel's hands. He frowned, his fingers exploring its shape. "A cassette tape. An audiobook I recorded for you. It's the story of Chris Downey, an architect who went blind at the age of 45 and continued working in architecture, developing sensory projects." Daniel was silent, his fingers still tracing the outline of the ribbon. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with restrained emotion. "Why do you care so much? Why do you insist when everyone else has already given up?" The question took Camilla by surprise. For a moment, she also questioned herself. Why had she gotten so deeply involved with that broken family? The answer came naturally. "Because I see possibilities where others see only problems, and because," she hesitated, "because I know what it's like to be adrift, needing someone to believe in you when you can't even believe in yourself." Daniel turned his face toward her, as if he could see her. There was a rare vulnerability in his expression. "What happened to your baby's father?" he asked, surprising Camilla with the role reversal. Camilla took a deep breath. "Hugo is a complicated man. When I found out about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father, that his career was just beginning, that I could solve the problem." She paused. "When I made it clear that I would have the baby, with or without him, Hugo just disappeared." Daniel absorbed the story in silence. Then, to Camilla's surprise, he reached out and found her hand, squeezing it briefly. "We're both abandoned then," he said with a sad smile. "Abandoned, but not alone," Camilla corrected. At that moment, something important was cemented between them, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. Camilla realized that little by little, she was breaking down the barriers Daniel had built around himself. And perhaps, in the process, she was also rebuilding something within herself. As the days turned into weeks, small changes occurred in the Anderson mansion. Camilla noticed that gradually the oppressive silence that dominated the mansion gave way to a lighter atmosphere. It was not only Daniel who was changing under her care. The entire house seemed to awaken from a long lethargy. One particularly sunny morning, as they walked through the extensive garden, Camilla noticed how Daniel held his cane with more confidence, how his posture was more erect, how his face occasionally turned toward the sun, seeking its warmth. "You know what's weird?" he said, interrupting Camilla's thoughts. "I can feel the seasons much more intensely now. Summer has a specific smell, a texture in the air." Camilla smiled, admiring the sensitivity that was developing in him. The world reveals itself in different ways when we lose one sense. The others sharpen as a natural compensation. "My father thinks I'm getting better because of you," Daniel said, with that frankness that Camilla had learned to appreciate. "I heard him talking to Teresa last night." "And what do you think?" Camilla asked, genuinely curious. Daniel paused, his face taking on a contemplative expression. "I guess you don't try to fix me. Everyone else used to try to cure me of blindness like it was a passing flu. You're just there. That makes a difference." That observation touched Camilla deeply. In the simplicity of those words, there was a truth about human connections that went far beyond the professional relationship that theoretically should exist between them. Later that day, while organizing some clothes in her room, Camilla found the photo album Raphael had given her. She flipped through it again, stopping at the images of Sophia, the absent mother whose shadow still loomed over the house. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Raphael, looking more relaxed than usual, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. "May I come in?" he asked, waiting for Camilla's nod before crossing the threshold. "Daniel told me about your walk today. He said you convinced him to use his cane effectively for the first time." Camilla closed the album, placing it on the dresser. "It was his decision. I believe he is ready to accept some adaptations. Raphael walked over, noticing the album. I see you found the photographs. I hope you don't mind. It helps to understand the family dynamics, the past that shaped you. I don't mind, Raphael assured, sitting on the edge of the bed. In fact, I think we need to talk about this, about Sophia, about what happened. Daniel seems to trust you in a way he doesn't trust anyone else. Camilla realized that there was a rare opportunity here, a moment of vulnerability from a man who rarely let his defenses down. Why did she leave? He asked directly, sitting down next to him. Keeping a respectful distance, but close enough to establish intimacy in the conversation, Raphael took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if he were looking beyond the walls of the room, into a painful past. Sophia has always been restless, like a bird that can't land in one place for long. When we met, I fell in love with that wild freedom. She exuded. A sad smile played across his lips. I believed I could give her roots, a home, stability. I was young and arrogant enough to think my love would be enough to cure her of her own demons. Camilla listened intently, noticing the layers of pain and belated understanding in that confession. After Daniel was born, something changed in her. It wasn't postpartum depression as initially suggested. It was deeper, more existential, as if motherhood had awakened fears she'd kept buried. Camilla remembered the photograph of Sophia with the man who wasn't Raphael, the note on the back. Matteo, she said softly. Her brother? Raphael's eyes widened slightly in surprise. You are observant. Yes, Matteo, Sophia's older brother, a remarkable man. Blind since adolescence due to a rare genetic condition. The revelation hit Camilla like a wave. Suddenly, several pieces of the puzzle fell into place. She feared that Daniel might develop the same condition, Camilla concluded, not as a question, but as Camilla's realization of the truth. Raphael nodded slowly. We ran tests when Daniel was born. He hadn't inherited the condition. But Sophia's fear was irrational, obsessive. She constantly checked his vision, created tests, noted every little stumble as a possible symptom. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. One day she just couldn't take it anymore. She left a letter, some clothes, and left. She said it was better this way, that her constant fear would end up hurting Daniel more than her absence. The irony is cruel, Camilla commented, thinking about the accident that would eventually take Daniel's sight, years after he abandoned himself out of fear of exactly that outcome. Life has a wicked sense of humor, Raphael agreed, running a hand through his gray hair. When the accident happened, I tried to find her. I sent messages to all the contacts we had, old addresses, nothing. It was like she had completely disappeared. Camilla felt a wave of compassion for this strong man who had carried so many burdens. Alone. The absence of his wife. His son's accident. The guilt that clearly still consumed him. Daniel deserves to know the truth, she said gently. About his mother's fears, about his uncle's condition. Maybe it will help him understand that his abandonment was not for lack of love, but for love distorted by fear. Raphael stared at her, a new intensity in his gaze. You always see beyond appearances, don't you? Always trying to understand instead of judge. Maybe because I myself was judged so harshly, Camilla replied, instinctively putting her hand to her belly. When Hugo found out I was pregnant, his first reaction was to suggest I solve the problem. When I made it clear that I would have the baby, with or without him, he simply disappeared. People make terrible choices when they are afraid. A contemplative. Silence settled between them. Camilla realized with some surprise how comfortable they felt in that shared silence, as if somehow they had overcome the barriers of employer and employee, of circumstantial strangers, to something closer to friendship, complicity. There was an as-yet uncharted emotional territory developing between them. The moment was interrupted by the shrill sound of the doorbell. They both looked at each other, surprised by the unexpected visit. Are you waiting for someone? Camilla asked. Raphael shook his head, standing up. It must be a co-worker. I asked them to send some documents today. Camilla followed him down the hallway, an uncomfortable feeling growing in her chest. The last few unexpected visits to the mansion had brought revelations and confrontations. Something told her that this one would be no different. When Teresa opened the door, revealing Hugo's elegant and proud figure, Camilla felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. He was not alone. Beside him was a middle-aged woman with aristocratic features that could only belong to her mother, and a man in a sober suit carrying a briefcase of documents. "Camilla," Hugo greeted her with a restrained nod, his eyes quickly roaming over her even more prominent belly. "We need to talk." Raphael immediately positioned himself next to Camilla, his body slightly in front of hers in an instinctive, protective stance. "Miss Mueller was not expecting visitors," he replied with controlled coldness. "And you are?" the older woman asked, her tone exuding an arrogance that made Camilla grit her teeth. "Raphael Anderson," he replied, his erect posture conveying a confidence that Camilla envied at that moment. "Owner of this house and Miss Muller's employer. Eleonora Moretti," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand adorned with precious stone rings. "Hugo's mother and soon grandmother of the baby Camilla is expecting." The possessive tone in the word grandmother made Camilla's stomach twist. Even more disconcerting was noticing Daniel approaching down the hallway, drawn by the unfamiliar voices, his cane gently touching the floor in front of him. "What's going on?" the teenager asked, stopping a few steps behind Raphael and Camilla. Hugo watched the boy with evident discomfort, clearly unsure how to react to the presence of a blind teenager in what he hoped would be a private confrontation. "Private matters," he replied curtly. "In this house there are no private matters that exclude Daniel," Raphael replied firmly. "If you want to talk to Camilla, he stays." Camilla felt a wave of gratitude for the protective stance of both of them, Raphael and Daniel side by side, forming a physical and emotional barrier between her and the unwanted visitors. "Very well," Eleonora conceded with a phony smile. "In fact, the more witnesses, the better. We are here to discuss formal acknowledgement of paternity and joint custody arrangements for the child." "Shared custody?" Camilla repeated, incredulous. "Hugo abandoned me and the baby the moment he found out about the pregnancy. What moral right does he have now to demand any participation?" The man in the suit, clearly a lawyer, stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "The law recognizes the birth father's right regardless of the emotional circumstances of the relationship. Mr. Moretti is willing to assume all financial and legal responsibilities related to the child." "That's absurd," Daniel interjected, unexpectedly, his young but firm voice cutting through the tension. He didn't want the baby when it was inconvenient, but now that Camilla has found stability and support, he suddenly develops paternal instincts. It seems more like opportunism than love. The teenager's sharp remark caused a momentary silence. Hugo seemed genuinely disconcerted at being confronted in this way by someone so young. "I don't expect a child to understand the complexities of adult relationships," he finally replied, condescendingly. "And I didn't expect an adult to demonstrate such moral cowardice," Daniel immediately retorted, drawing an involuntary smile from Camilla, despite the tense situation. Eleonora Moretti drummed her fingers on her designer bag, her displeasure evident. "This is becoming unnecessarily hostile. We come with a generous proposal, Camilla. The Moretti family is willing to provide your son Aminuku daughter," Camilla corrected automatically. Your daughter," Eleonora continued after a brief pause, "all the advantages that our name and position can offer. Exclusive schools, social connections, a secure future." Camilla felt a mixture of anger and disbelief rising within her. The audacity of this woman, trying to buy her way into her daughter's life with promises of material privileges, completely ignoring Hugo's initial abandonment, was revolting. "My daughter already has a secure future," she replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "She will have a mother who loves her unconditionally, and people around her who have shown her true loyalty and support, not momentary convenience." Raphael took a small step forward, his presence solid as a rock at Camilla's side. I suggest that this conversation be resumed in a more appropriate setting, with adequate legal representation for both parties. Miss Miller is in an advanced stage of pregnancy, and this type of stress is not recommended. The Moretti lawyer exchanged a look with Eleonora, who nodded briefly. Very well, he agreed, pulling a business card from his briefcase. We will be in touch to schedule a formal meeting, but let me make it clear that the Moretti family is determined to secure its place in this child's life. As the visitors left, Camilla felt her legs weaken. The impact of that confrontation, combined with the previous revelations about Sofia and Matteo, seemed too heavy to bear. Raphael noticed her fragility, gently supporting her by the elbow and guiding her to the nearest sofa. Take a deep breath, he instructed gently. They're gone. Daniel sat down beside her, his expression worried. Can they really do that? Demand joint custody after he abandoned you? Camilla exchanged a meaningful look with Raphael, knowing the answer was neither simple nor comforting. Legally, yes, he has rights, Raphael explained, his voice calm but tense. But it doesn't mean a judge would automatically grant joint custody, especially considering the circumstances of the abandonment. They have money and influence, Camilla murmured, one hand resting protectively on her belly. They could drag this out for years, make our lives a legal hell. A heavy silence settled over the room, each one absorbed in their own thoughts, calculating possibilities, fearing results. It was Teresa who broke the silence, entering with a tray of tea that no one had asked for, but which seemed strangely necessary at that moment. If I may be so bold, the housekeeper said as she poured the tea with precise movements, there are ways to strengthen your position, Miss Camilla. Everyone turned their attention to Teresa, surprised by her unusual intervention. What do you suggest, Teresa? Asked Raphael. The housekeeper placed the tray on the table and adjusted her immaculate apron, a gesture that Camilla had already identified as her ritual for buying time before saying something important. A marriage would provide unquestionable legal stability, Teresa finally replied, with the practicality of someone suggesting an ingredient for a recipe. A single mother faces prejudices that can be exploited in court. A married woman with a stable home and a respectable husband presents a much more favorable picture to any judge. The silence that followed that suggestion was thick as fog. Camilla felt heat rise to her cheeks, unable to look at Raphael. The idea of a marriage of convenience, for that was all it could be, seemed simultaneously absurd and strangely logical. It's a valid consideration, Raphael said finally, his voice controlled, devoid of any identifiable emotion. From a strictly strategic point of view, Camilla finally gathered the courage to face him, surprised to find not embarrassment in his eyes, but a kind of determined resolve. Are you suggesting that we get married? She asked, the word sounding strange on her lips, loaded with implications she could barely process. I am suggesting that we consider all available options, he replied carefully. A temporary arrangement, perhaps, until the legal situation is resolved. Daniel, who had remained silent, absorbing this extraordinary turn of events in the conversation, let out a short, dry laugh. Only you adults could turn something so simple into something so complicated, he commented, standing up in one fluid movement. Why don't you just admit that you're already behaving like a real family and make it official once and for all? With this disconcertingly insightful observation, the teenager left the room, leaving Camilla and Raphael in a silence filled with unspoken possibilities, with unrecognized feelings that perhaps finally needed to be confronted. The Anderson Mansion's library, with its leather-bound books and dark wood furniture, had witnessed decades of important decisions, crucial conversations, and family secrets. This morning, the room felt even more solemn as Camilla and Daniel walked in to find Raphael sitting behind his desk, a folder of documents open in front of him. Please sit down, he invited, indicating the chairs in front of the table. There are important matters we need to discuss before Hugo returns. Camilla watched as Daniel, despite not being able to see, seemed to sense the tense atmosphere in the room. The teenager found his way to one of the armchairs with surprising ease, the result of weeks of practice navigating the spaces of the house. "Is it about custody rights?" Camilla asked, going straight to the point that worried her the most. Raphael closed the folder in front of him, his fingers drumming briefly on it. "Yes, in part. I consulted a lawyer friend this morning. As the biological father, Hugo has certain legal rights, but the fact that he abandoned you during your pregnancy and suggested termination weighs significantly in his favor." Camilla nodded, feeling a slight relief. What if he wants to take a paternity test? That is expected and even recommended for the legal process. But there is another matter. Raphael hesitated, his gaze briefly shifting to Daniel. "Something I need to share with you, a family secret that might help you understand some situations." Camilla felt a shiver run down her spine. The photo of Sophia with her brother, the comment about the hereditary disease, everything pointed to a revelation that could change the dynamics of that family forever. "It's about my mother," Daniel said, not as a question but as a statement. His keen perception, as always, surprised Camilla. Raphael seemed momentarily disarmed by his son's intuition. "Yes, it's about Sophia, and also about you, about us as a family." He stood up, walking over to one of the bookshelves. From behind, a row of encyclopedias. He pulled out a small carved wooden box. Returning to the table, he carefully opened it, revealing a diary with a worn blue cover and a few old photographs. "I found this in the attic a few days ago when I was looking for old documents," Raphael explained. "It's your mother's diary, Daniel. The last entries are from a few days before she passed away." Daniel's face remained impassive, but Camilla noticed how his fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. A subtle gesture that revealed the emotional storm that this revelation unleashed. "Why are you telling me this now?" the teenager asked, his voice controlled but tense. Raphael took a deep breath before answering. "Because what is written here changes everything we thought we knew about your mother's departure. And because, given the situation with Hugo, I realized that secrets, even when kept with good intentions, often cause more harm than protection." Camilla watched the interaction between father and son with a heavy heart. There was so much unexpressed love, so much pain accumulated between them. "Your uncle Matteo, Sophia's brother, had a genetic condition called retinitis pigmentosa," Raphael continued, addressing Daniel. "A degenerative disease that, over the years, causes progressive loss of vision until total blindness." Daniel stood completely still, as if each word was a physical impact. "It's hereditary," he concluded, his voice little more than a whisper. "Yes. There is a chance of genetic transmission. When you were born, we tested you. The results were negative. You had not inherited the condition." Raphael paused, his voice cracking slightly. "But Sophia never completely trusted the doctors. The fear that you might one day meet the same fate as your brother became an obsession with her." Camilla was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. "Is that why she left, out of fear?" Raphael opened the diary, flipping through it until he found a specific page. In his own words, "I can't bear to see the signs, to look for symptoms in every stumble and every time he strays too close to the TV. This fear is consuming me, turning my love into an unhealthy vigilance. Maybe by pulling away, I can protect him from the anxiety that would suffocate him. Maybe it's better that he hates me for abandoning him than that he live under the shadow of my constant fear." The words hung in the air like ghosts, finally free after years of confinement in those pages. Daniel remained silent, his face turned toward the window, as if searching for the light he could no longer see. "The irony is almost cruel," he finally observed, his voice surprisingly calm. "She abandoned me for fear of a blindness that would never come naturally, only to have me lose my sight in an accident years later." Camilla reached out, gently touching Daniel's arm. "Sometimes our greatest fears lead us to make decisions that, in retrospect, seem incomprehensible. Your mother acted out of love, even if it was in a way that was distorted by fear." "Does she know?" Daniel asked suddenly, turning to his father. "About the accident, about my blindness?" Raphael closed the diary carefully. I tried to contact her when it happened. The numbers we had no longer worked. I sent letters to the last known addresses, but I never got a reply. A heavy silence settled over the library. Camilla watched as Daniel processed the information, his expression going through a series of emotions: shock, sadness, anger, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked again, this time with a different tone. Not one of accusation, but of genuine curiosity. Raphael hesitated, his eyes briefly meeting Camilla's, as if seeking support. "Because I understand that silence doesn't always protect the ones we love. Because I've seen how Camilla has been honest with you, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And because—" He paused, his voice breaking. "Because I don't want to lose you too, son. I don't want us to grow further apart because of secrets and half-truths." The vulnerability in Raphael's voice struck Camilla deeply. In that moment, she saw beyond the controlled, formal man. She saw a father struggling to reconnect with his son, to reclaim something he feared was lost forever. Daniel reached out, his fingers searching the air until they found the diary on the table. "Can I have this?" "It is yours by right," Raphael replied. "There are also letters your mother sent over the years, addressed to you to be delivered when you turned 18. I have kept them, respecting your request, but now I believe you should decide when you want to read them." Camilla realized that she was witnessing a pivotal moment in the relationship between father and son, a moment of honesty that could serve as the foundation for a new, mutual understanding. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Teresa entered, her expression more serious than usual. "Forgive the interruption, but I thought you should know. A car has just pulled up to the gate. It's him, Mr. Hugo, and he's not alone." Camilla felt a tightness in her chest. "He wasn't supposed to be back until the afternoon." "It seems he's changed his mind," Teresa commented, her displeasure evident. "He's accompanied by an elegant woman and a formal-looking older man." "Lawyers," Camilla murmured, struggling to her feet. Sudden anxiety made the baby stir in her belly. Raphael stood up immediately. "We don't need to receive them now. We weren't prepared for this visit." "No," Camilla said with a determination that surprised even herself. "Let's end this once and for all. I'm tired of living in fear, of feeling trapped." Daniel also stood up, his posture straight and determined. "We will be with you." That simple promise gave Camilla the strength she needed. With Raphael on one side and Daniel on the other, she walked down the hallway toward the entrance hall, where Teresa had already invited the visitors to wait. Hugo was standing in the center of the hall, flanked by a woman of about 50, dressed with discreet elegance, and a serious-looking man carrying a leather briefcase. "Camilla," Hugo began, his tone artificially cordial. "I know we planned to do it later, but I thought it best to get this over with as soon as possible." He gestured to his companions. "This is my mother, Eleonora Moretti, and Dr. Angelo Becker, the family lawyer." Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. The presence of the matriarch of the Moretti family took the situation to a new level of seriousness. Eleonora watched her with critical eyes, evaluating every detail, from her prominent belly to the simple clothes Camilla was wearing. "Ma'am," Camilla greeted with forced politeness, "this visit is unexpected." Eleonora Moretti stepped forward, ignoring the comment. Her eyes, the same shade as Hugo's, examined Camilla as if she were evaluating merchandise. "So it is true," she said, her aristocratic tone echoing in the hall. "My son will have an heiress, a situation we need to properly regularize." The word heiress confirmed Camilla's suspicions. It wasn't about paternity or affection. It was about heritage, about the family name. "There's nothing to settle," Camilla replied, maintaining her composure. "Your granddaughter will be born in a few weeks, and I am perfectly capable of raising her." The lawyer cleared his throat, opening his briefcase. "Mrs. Muller, we are here to discuss the terms of joint custody and the official recognition of paternity, with all the legal implications that this entails. The Moretti family is willing to be more than generous in financial terms." Raphael stepped forward, his presence calm but imposing. "I think they're rushing things." Camilla has expressed no desire to share custody of her daughter, especially considering the circumstances of her abandonment during pregnancy. The lawyer smiled condescendingly. And you are? Raphael Anderson, friend and supporter of Mrs. Muller, and I firmly believe that this discussion should take place in a formal setting with adequate legal representation for both parties. Eleonora watched Raphael with renewed interest, clearly recognizing the Anderson surname, a traditional family in the architectural field. I understand your concern, Mr. Anderson, but this is a family matter. My son made a mistake in stepping away temporarily, but he is now ready to take on his responsibilities. Responsibilities? Daniel interjected unexpectedly, his young but firm voice cutting through the tension. What kind of responsibility begins with abandonment and continues with veiled threats? All eyes turned to the teenager. Hugo seemed particularly uncomfortable with his presence. I don't know who you are, boy, but that's none of your business, he retorted. It concerns everyone who cares about Camilla and the baby, Daniel replied, his cane tapping lightly on the floor in a gesture of emphasis. And unlike you, we cared about them from the beginning, not just when a convenient interest arose. The tension in the room was palpable. Camilla felt a wave of affection for this unlikely family that defended her so firmly. I suggest we reschedule this conversation, she said finally, with my own attorney present. Eleonora Moretti narrowed her eyes, her posture stiffening. I hope you understand what's at stake here, Miss Muller. We're offering not just financial support, but the opportunity for your daughter to grow up as a Moretti with all the privileges that entails. I would rather my daughter grow up with love and respect, Camilla replied calmly. Values that until now I have not seen demonstrated by her family. A heavy silence followed this statement. The lawyer whispered something in Eleonora's ear, who nodded briefly before turning back to look at Camilla. Very well. We will respect your desire to formalize this discussion with proper legal representation. But please know that the Moretti family will not easily give up a member of their own blood. With that final statement, which sounded dangerously close to a threat, Eleonora gestured for Hugo and the lawyer to follow her outside. At the last moment, Hugo turned, his gaze meeting Camilla's. It doesn't have to be this way, Camilla, he said quietly. We could try again, build a real family. Camilla felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the implicit suggestion. My answer is no, Hugo. To you, to your mother, to everything you represent. When the door finally closed behind the visitors, Camilla felt her legs weaken. Raphael quickly supported her, guiding her to a nearby sofa. You were amazing, Daniel said, sitting down next to her. You faced them all like a true warrior. Camilla smiled weakly, touched by the compliment. I had good allies. Raphael knelt before her, his eyes meeting hers with surprising intensity. Camilla, there's something I need to ask you, and I'll understand perfectly if the answer is no. Camilla looked at him, intrigued by the seriousness in his voice. Yes? Marriage, he said simply. A legal arrangement that would provide additional protection against the Moretti's claims. If you had a husband, their custody claim would be significantly weakened. Camilla blinked, stunned by the unexpected proposal. Are you proposing to me? I'm offering a practical solution, Raphael replied, though something in his eyes suggested there was more to the proposal than mere practicality. A marriage of convenience, if you prefer to call it that, with no expectations other than the legal protection it would afford you and your daughter. Camilla felt momentarily speechless. The proposal was surprising, but she could not deny that there was logic to it. A marriage to Raphael Anderson, a CGI respected man with an established social position, would create a legal shield against the Moretti's ambitions. The days following Raphael's unexpected proposal were marked by intense conversations, careful consideration, and a series of legal consultations. Camilla, initially stunned by the suggestion of a marriage of convenience, asked for time to reflect, a request Raphael respected without pressuring her. It's not a decision that should be made in the heat of the moment, he said over dinner, 3 days after the Moretti's visit. It's a strategic solution, but I completely understand if you prefer to explore other options. Camilla watched him across the dinner table, noticing how their relationship had evolved in just a few weeks, from a strictly professional relationship to something more complex, a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and perhaps something deeper that neither of them were quite ready to name. "Have you ever considered that we could win this battle without resorting to such extreme measures?" she asked, picking absently at her dessert. "Hugo may have money and connections, but he abandoned a pregnant woman. No judge would look favorably on that." "I agree, and so does your lawyer. But the Morettis have the resources to drag out the case indefinitely, turning it into a war of attrition." Raphael hesitated before continuing. "I don't want to pressure you, Camilla. The decision is entirely yours." The silence that followed was interrupted by Daniel, who had been listening to the conversation with characteristic attention. "Why don't you give it a try?" he suggested, surprising them both. "A test?" Camilla asked, intrigued. "Yes, announce the engagement publicly. See how the Morettis react. If they back down, we'll know the strategy works. If not," Daniel shrugged, "nothing stops them from breaking off the engagement later." Camilla and Raphael exchanged surprised glances. Daniel's suggestion was unexpectedly pragmatic. "It's an intriguing idea," Raphael admitted, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Strategic." "A fake engagement," Camilla murmured, considering the proposal. "It could work as a show of strength without the permanent commitment of marriage." Daniel's suggestion was the catalyst for a chain of events that neither of them could have fully foreseen. 2 days later, the local newspaper published a short article in the society section. "Renowned architect Raphael Anderson announces engagement to Camilla Müller. The couple is expecting their first child in the coming weeks." The reaction was almost immediate. On the morning of the publication, Camilla received a call from Hugo. "An engagement? Seriously, Camilla?" he asked, his voice wavering between anger and disbelief. "You barely know this man." "I don't owe you an explanation about my personal life, Hugo," she replied with a calmness that surprised even herself. "Especially not to someone who chose not to be a part of it. That complicates things," he said after a moment of tense silence. "My mother is furious. She thinks it was all planned to keep us away from the child." Camilla felt a wave of satisfaction as she realized that the plan was already showing results. "There's nothing planned, Hugo. I simply found someone who values me and is willing to raise my daughter as his own, something you explicitly refused to do." The call ended on a sour note, with Hugo promising that this isn't over. But Camilla felt stronger than ever, protected not only by the legal strategy, but by the genuine support she had found at the Anderson mansion. What none of them expected, however, was how the farce would begin to blur the boundaries of reality. Formal dinner was organized to celebrate the engagement, a small gathering of a few of Raphael's close friends and partners from the architecture firm. The intention was to solidify the story, to create witnesses who could attest to the veracity of the relationship, should the Morettis question it. For the occasion, Raphael presented Camilla with a ring, a delicate piece with an emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, as he slid the ring onto Camilla's finger in the privacy of the library. "I thought it would feel more authentic if it had family history." The touch of his fingers was more tingling than necessary, and Camilla felt an unexpected shiver run down her spine. There was a growing intimacy between them that went beyond mere acting. "It's beautiful," she murmured, watching the stone catch the light. "Are you sure you want to use something so meaningful for this?" Raphael stared at her intently. "Nothing about this is trivial to me, Camilla." That statement hung between them, loaded with meanings not fully explored. The moment was interrupted by Teresa, announcing the arrival of the first guests. During dinner, Camilla watched Raphael in his element, interacting with colleagues and friends. There was a lightness in his demeanor that she had rarely seen before, as if the charade of his engagement had allowed him to express something he had kept bottled up. When he introduced Camilla as his fiancée, there was a sparkle in his eyes that seemed to transcend any act. Daniel, there to meet the guests, navigated the event with surprising grace. His condition, rather than limiting him, seemed to sharpen his ability to connect with others through conversation, attentive listening, and small gestures that demonstrated a perception beyond the visual. "Your son is extraordinary," commented one of the guests, an architect who worked with Raphael. "The way he overcame his condition is inspiring." Camilla smiled, feeling a pride that surprised her with its intensity. "He really is amazing, and he's been a huge support to me throughout the pregnancy." "You guys seem like a real family," the woman observed sincerely. "It's rare to see such genuine connections." That comment touched Camilla deeply. In fact, what had begun as a professional arrangement evolved into a strategic alliance now had undeniable contours of a true family, built not by blood ties but by daily choices, by small acts of care and mutual respect. At the end of the evening, when the last guest had left, Camilla, Raphael, and Daniel remained in the living room, a comfortable silence hanging between them. Teresa served tea before retiring to her quarters, leaving the family alone. "It worked out better than we expected," Daniel commented, a satisfied smile on his lips. "I've heard at least 3 people comment on how perfect you two look together." Camilla felt a blush rise to her cheeks, grateful that Daniel couldn't see her reaction. "It was a nice evening," Raphael agreed, his gaze meeting Camilla's with an intensity that made her heart race, more natural than I imagined. The next morning, the dynamic at the Anderson mansion had subtly changed. Raphael, normally reserved during meals, joined Camilla and Daniel for breakfast on the porch, sharing stories of his early projects as an architect. There was a sense of domestic normalcy that seemed to wrap everyone in a protective cocoon. It was in this atmosphere of apparent tranquility that the doorbell rang, bringing a completely unexpected visit. Teresa answered the door and returned to the balcony with a clearly disturbed expression. "Mr. Raphael, there is a visitor. She says she needs to see you urgently." Something about the housekeeper's hesitation made Camilla feel a shiver of apprehension. Raphael frowned, puzzled by the interruption. "Who is it, Teresa?" Before the housekeeper could respond, a woman of about 45 appeared at the entrance to the porch. Tall, elegant, with brown hair cut in a modern bob, she seemed the epitome of composure, except for her eyes, which revealed an inner turmoil. "Hello, Raphael," she said, her voice controlled but slightly shaky. "It's been a long time." The effect of that voice on those present was immediate and profound. Raphael paled visibly. Teresa took an involuntary step back, and Daniel stood completely still, as if he had been turned to stone. "Sophia," Raphael murmured, the name coming out as a disbelieving sigh. Camilla understood instantly. The woman standing before them, her expression one of determination and vulnerability, was Sophia Anderson, the mother who had abandoned Daniel 7 years ago, the woman whose diary had revealed a story of love twisted by fear, the figure whose absence had profoundly shaped their family's lives. "Mom?" Daniel's voice broke the stunned silence, a single word carrying years of pain, confusion, and unanswered questions. Sophia stepped forward, hesitantly, her eyes fixed on her son who could not see her. "Daniel, my son." Her voice trailed off. "I came as soon as I heard." "What exactly did you learn?" Raphael asked, recovering from his initial shock. "And how, after all these years?" Sophia looked away briefly. "Of the accident, of Daniel's blindness." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Matteo happened to see the news in an online newspaper. Searching for information about architecture, he found a mention of you and the accident. Camilla." Watched the scene with a heavy heart, feeling simultaneously like an intruder in an intensely private moment and an integral part of that fractured family. Instinctively, her hand reached for Daniel's, finding it cold and rigid on the table. "And it took you almost a year to decide to show up?" Daniel asked, his voice controlled but thick with emotion. "Convenient." Sophia took another step toward her son, stopping when she noticed how he flinched at the sound of her approach. I didn't know if I would be welcome. If you would hate me, if my presence would only make things worse. So why now? Raphael asked, his tone wavering between accusation and genuine curiosity. Sophia looked at Camilla for the first time, her eyes taking in her growing belly, her engagement ring, her closeness to Daniel. I heard about the engagement, the pregnancy, the new family you're creating. She hesitated. I realized I was missing my last chance to be a part of my son's life. A tense silence followed that statement. Camilla felt the weight of her words, the bitter irony of the situation. The mother who had left out of fear returned driven by fear, not so much that her son might lose his sight, but that she might lose him completely. You read the diary, Sophia said suddenly, looking at Daniel. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Yes, he replied simply. Father showed me a few days ago. Sophia nodded slowly. So you know. About Matteo, about my fear, about why I... She couldn't finish the sentence. About why you ran away, Daniel added bluntly. Yes, I know. Doesn't the irony seem extraordinary to you? You ran away out of fear of genetic blindness that never happened, only to have me lose my sight in an accident years later. The harshness of that remark made Sophia take a step back, as if she had been physically struck. Her eyes filled with tears that she fought to hold back. If you still care about the answer, Daniel continued, his tone softening slightly. No, I don't hate you, not anymore. I don't know you. The woman who abandoned me is a stranger to me now. Camilla gently squeezed Daniel's hand, offering silent support. She admired the maturity with which he faced this devastating moment, the honesty of his words, without deliberate cruelty. I came to ask for a chance, Sophia said finally, her voice breaking. Not to pick up where we left off, that would be impossible, but to get to know the young man you've become, to be a part of your life, even if only on the edges. Raphael, who had been watching the interaction with restrained intensity, finally spoke. That's Daniel's decision, not mine. Our house is open if he wants you here. All eyes turned to the teenager, whose face reflected an internal battle of contradictory emotions. I need time, he said finally. I can't just hold you and pretend the last 7 years didn't happen. Sophia nodded, accepting that answer as more than she could have hoped for. I see. I'm staying at the Central Hotel downtown. I'll be here for at least 2 weeks. She hesitated before adding, I'll be here if you want to see me. The moment was interrupted by a sudden moan from Camilla, who doubled over, her hand clutching her belly. Camilla! Raphael was at her side instantly, concern evident in his voice. I'm fine, she gasped, though her pinched face indicated otherwise. Just a bad contraction. Contractions, Raphael repeated, alarmed. But there are still almost 3 weeks left until the due date. Camilla tried to smile reassuringly, but another wave of pain made her grit her teeth. Babies have their own calendar, apparently. The family tension was immediately replaced by collective concern. Even Sophia, the newcomer, approached with evident uneasiness. We need to get her to the hospital immediately, Raphael declared, his tone brooking no argument. Teresa, please call Dr. Martins and let him know we're on our way. They're just preliminary contractions, Camilla protested weakly. They could be a false alarm. But when she tried to get up, a new contraction, stronger than the previous ones, made her let out a muffled scream. A clear liquid ran down the chair where she was sitting, forming a small puddle on the floor of the balcony. Your water broke, Sophia observed, unexpectedly assuming a matter-of-fact tone. It's not a false alarm. The baby is coming. The next hour passed in a blur of frenetic activity. Raphael led Camilla to her car, while Teresa hurriedly gathered the small suitcase that had been packed weeks earlier. Daniel insisted on accompanying them, his anxiety for Camilla momentarily overcoming the shock of being reunited with his mother. Surprisingly, it was Sophia who remained calm throughout the process. With her experience as a birthing professional, she offered practical guidance, helped Camilla with breathing techniques, and assured everyone that the process, while scary, was perfectly natural. At the moment of departure, when Raphael was already starting the car engine, Sophia briefly held Camilla's hand. "You'll make a great mother," she said with an intensity that surprised everyone. "I can see that clearly." Camilla, between contractions, found the strength to respond. "Thank you. But I won't abandon you. No matter what happens." The words, though spoken without deliberate malice, hung in the air like a painful reminder of the past. Sophia recoiled, accepting the unintentional blow with quiet dignity. "I'll stay here," she told Raphael, "if you need anything." As the car pulled away toward the hospital, Camilla clutching Daniel's hand in the back seat and Raphael driving with intense concentration, a startling thought occurred to Camilla. The child she was about to bring into the world would be born not only at a time of pain, but also of possible reconciliation. Her new life arriving just as old wounds were perhaps beginning to heal. The São Lucas Hospital, a modern building on the outskirts of the city, received them with the expected efficiency. Camilla was immediately taken to the maternity ward, while Raphael and Daniel were directed to the waiting room, after Raphael insisted that he was the fiancé and Daniel the stepson. The next few hours were a roller coaster of emotions. Camilla, between increasingly intense contractions, found herself in an almost dreamlike state, where past and present blended together. She saw Raphael's worried face when he was allowed to visit her briefly, felt the constant presence of the head nurse monitoring her progress, and, in moments of clarity, wondered about the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she was alone, abandoned, and desperate. Now, she was about to give birth surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, an unlikely family forged not by blood, but by daily choices, by small acts of kindness and acceptance. "It's almost time," the doctor announced after another examination. "With the next contraction, I want you to push." Camilla nodded, gathering her last reserves of energy. The world seemed reduced to that room, that moment, the life that struggled to come into the world through her. With one last monumental effort, Camilla felt her daughter slip out of her body. The vigorous cry that followed was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "A perfect little girl," the doctor announced, placing the baby on his chest. "Congratulations, Mommy." Camilla looked down at the tiny being in her arms, dark hair plastered to her scalp, eyes swollen shut, face red from the effort of birth. She had never seen a more perfect creature. "Aurora," he whispered, the name he had chosen months before. "My little Aurora." When Raphael and Daniel were finally allowed into the room, Camilla watched their reactions with overflowing emotion. Raphael, normally so restrained, had unshed tears shining in his eyes. And Daniel, the teenager who had built walls around himself, now hesitantly reached out his fingers to touch the newborn's face. "She's so little," he murmured in wonder. "Do you want to hold her?" Camilla offered, surprising everyone, including herself. Daniel paled. "What if I drop it? I can't see." "Your other senses compensate perfectly," Camilla assured him. "Sit here and stretch out your arms." With infinite care, she placed Aurora in the teenager's arms, adjusting them to the correct position to support the baby's head. The look of absolute concentration on Daniel's face as he held the newborn was an image Camilla knew she would cherish forever. "Hello, Aurora," he said softly. "I'm Daniel. I can't see you, but I promise I'll always be there to protect you." Raphael watched the scene with an expression that mixed pride and something deeper, a kind of peace that had been absent from his face for a long time. "We're a family now," he said, almost as a statement to himself. "A real family." Camilla reached out, finding Raphael's hand. Her touch, her fingers intertwining with his, was no longer part of an act, but a silent acknowledgement of something that had blossomed naturally between them, a feeling that had yet to be named, but which promised depth and permanence. The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. A nurse entered, followed by Teresa, who was carrying a bouquet of flowers. "There are more visitors waiting," the nurse announced. "A Mrs. Moretti and—" "No," Camilla interrupted firmly. "I don't want to see them now." The nurse looked momentarily confused. "Oh, sorry, actually it's a Mrs. Anderson. Sophia Anderson. She said she's the grandmother?" The silence that followed was laden with unspoken emotions. Daniel, still holding Aurora with meticulous care, turned his face toward the door. "Let her in," he said finally, his voice surprisingly steady. "I think Aurora deserves to meet all the members of her family, even the ones who have been away for a while." The first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains of Camilla's room, illuminating little Aurora, who slept peacefully in the crib next to the bed. 3 weeks had passed since her birth, and the Anderson mansion breathed a different energy, lighter, more vibrant, as if the arrival of this new life had dispelled old shadows. Camilla watched her daughter with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Every little movement, every soft sigh in her sleep seemed like a miracle. Sometimes she was still surprised by the turn her life had taken in such a short time. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Raphael entered, carrying a tray with breakfast. "Good morning," he greeted with a smile that Camilla now knew well, that smile that seemed reserved only for her. "How are my favorite girls this morning?" Camilla smiled, settling herself in bed. "Aurora just fell asleep after her feeding, and I'm feeling stronger every day." Raphael placed the tray on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes roaming over Camilla's face with an intensity that made her blush. "Teresa thinks I'm spoiling her too much," he said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "She says coffee in bed is a dangerous habit to form." "Teresa is right as always," Camilla replied, accepting the cup gratefully, "but I confess that I could easily get used to this kind of treatment." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of silence that only exists between people who are completely comfortable in each other's presence. Camilla realized how precious it was, how in such a short time they had built something that many real couples never achieve. "The lawyer called last night," Raphael finally commented, his casual tone a contrast to the seriousness of the matter. "It seems the Morettis are reconsidering their position. Aurora's premature birth and our situation apparently took them by surprise." Camilla nodded, feeling cautious relief. The weeks since Aurora's birth had been surprisingly quiet as far as Hugo and his family were concerned. No new visitors, no legal threats, just an impersonal bouquet and a generic congratulatory card. "Have they given up?" she asked, wary of getting her hopes up prematurely. "Not exactly," Raphael replied, choosing his words carefully. "But the lawyer believes they're looking for a less confrontational approach. Perhaps some kind of arrangement that allows occasional visitation without any real interference in Aurora's upbringing." Camilla considered that possibility. The idea of Hugo having any kind of access to her daughter still bothered her deeply, but perhaps a controlled settlement would be preferable to a prolonged legal battle. "What about our arrangement?" she asked, indicating the engagement ring she still wore. What had begun as a strategy had now evolved into something more complex, more real, though still undefined. Raphael covered her hand with his touch gentle but firm. "That's entirely up to you, Camilla. If you want to keep up appearances, until the Moretti situation is completely resolved, I understand completely. If you'd rather end the charade—" He hesitated, a rare thing for his normally confident demeanor. "Or if you want to make it a reality, I'm open to whatever path you choose." Camilla's heart raced at those words. It was the first time Raphael had suggested, even indirectly, the possibility of a genuine relationship between them. Before she could respond, Aurora woke up, her small face contorting before she let out a high-pitched cry. "Someone has impeccable timing," Camilla commented with a smile, catching up with her daughter. "Can we continue this conversation later?" Raphael nodded, standing up. "I have a meeting at the office this morning, but I'll be back for lunch. Maybe the 4 of us can take a walk in the garden." The 4 he referred to included Daniel, who had become a constant presence at Aurora's side. The teenager had developed an instant bond with the baby, spending hours at her crib, talking softly or simply holding her tiny hand. Even more surprising was the evolution of the relationship between Daniel and Sophia. After the initial shock of their reunion, mother and son had begun a delicate process of rapprochement. It wasn't easy, There were moments of tension, painful silences, and difficult questions to answer. But there were also moments of genuine connection, especially when Aurora was present. "It's like she's a bridge," Daniel said one afternoon, as Camilla watched him hold Aurora, between what was lost and what can be rebuilt. Sophia had extended her stay, renting a small apartment near the mansion. She visited almost daily, always respecting the limits set by Daniel, never forcing an intimacy that would need time to develop naturally. When Camilla came down to the living room after nursing and changing Aurora, she found Daniel sitting at the piano, an instrument that had remained silent for years, according to Teresa. His fingers moved hesitantly over the keys, producing a simple but beautiful melody. "I didn't know it played," Camilla commented, approaching with Aurora in her arms. Daniel smiled, not stopping the music. "Mom taught me when I was little. After she left, I never played again." He paused. "We're relearning it together now. It's therapeutic." Camilla sat down next to him on the piano bench, Aurora snuggled against her chest. "It's beautiful, Daniel." "I'm writing something for Aurora," he confessed, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "A welcome song. It's not ready yet, but I'm sure she'll love it," Camilla assured, genuinely moved by the gesture. The morning passed peacefully. Camilla took advantage of the time while Aurora slept to organize some documents related to the agreement proposed by the Morettis. The lawyer had sent a draft that granted her full custody with extremely limited visitation rights for Hugo, a considerable victory given the power and influence of his family. Around noon, when Raphael was about to return for lunch, the doorbell rang. Camilla felt a tightness in her chest. Unexpected visitors had brought so many twists and turns to her life that she now instinctively feared them. Teresa answered the door and returned with an expression that mixed surprise and displeasure. "Miss Camilla," she announced formally, "Mr. Hugo Moretti requests to see you alone." Camilla exchanged a worried look with Daniel, who immediately took a protective stance at her side. "You don't have to receive it if you don't want to," the teenager reminded. Camilla took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "No, it's okay. It's better to face this once and for all. Could you stay with Aurora for a few minutes?" Daniel nodded, accepting the baby with the confidence he had gained over the past few weeks. "We'll be in the conservatory if you need anything. Just call." When Hugo entered the room, Camilla was surprised by his appearance. He seemed thinner, tired, without the usual arrogance in his posture. He was dressed as elegantly as ever, but there was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Thank you for having me," he began, remaining standing even as Camilla gestured him to a chair. "I won't take up much of your time." "What do you want, Hugo?" Camilla asked directly. "I thought we were going to resolve everything through the lawyers." He ran a hand through his hair, an unusually nervous gesture for someone normally so composed. "I came in person because some things need to be said face to face, not through intermediaries." Camilla waited, remaining silent. "I've only seen our daughter once in the hospital," he continued, his voice softer. "She's perfect, she has your eyes." "Aurora," Camilla said. "Her name is Aurora." "Aurora," Hugo repeated, testing the name. "It's beautiful." He paused, visibly struggling with his next words. "I came to tell you that I will no longer contest custody or insist on regular visitation." Camilla blinked, surprised by the unexpected statement. "What changed? Your mother?" "My mother no longer decides my life," Hugo interrupted with a firmness that surprised Camilla. "It took me too long to realize that, but I finally understood." He walked to the window, looking out at the garden for a few moments before continuing. "When I saw you with Anderson in the hospital, I realized something important." Hugo turned to face her. "I saw real love. I saw a real family being formed, and I realized that I could never offer that to Aurora, not the way I am now." Camilla felt the tension in her shoulders relax slightly, but she still kept her guard up. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to sign the paperwork your lawyer prepared, giving up joint custody. I will only retain the right to meet Aurora when she is older, if she wishes. He took a deep breath. And I'm leaving for another week. A job in Portugal, time and distance to reconsider a lot of things. The sincerity in his voice was disconcerting to Camilla, who had prepared herself for yet another battle, not surrender. And your mother? A bitter smile crossed Hugo's face. Let's just say our relationship is under construction. Just like me. He took an envelope from his inside jacket pocket and handed it to Camilla. Open it when I leave. It's a letter for Aurora, for when she's older. It explains some things she might want to know someday. Camilla accepted the envelope hesitantly. Hugo, Don't say anything, he interrupted gently. I don't deserve forgiveness or gratitude. I just want to do the right thing finally. He walked toward the door, pausing only to add, You make a beautiful family, Camilla. Aurora is lucky. After his departure, Camilla remained motionless for several minutes, the envelope weighing heavy in her hands, like a physical reminder of the past that finally seemed to be closing. That was how Raphael found her when he returned for lunch, sitting quietly, absorbed in thought, a closed envelope on her lap. Did something happen? He asked, immediately noticing her troubled expression. Camilla looked up, a hesitant smile forming on her lips. Hugo was here. He's giving up the custody battle. He's leaving for Portugal. Raphael sat down beside her, his relief visible. This is unexpected but wonderful. Are you okay? I am, she replied, surprised by the truth of that simple statement. In fact, I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders, like I can finally breathe fully. Raphael smiled, covering her hand with his, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting over the past few weeks. About our conversation this morning, Camilla continued, feeling suddenly brave. About our arrangement. Yes, Raphael encouraged when she hesitated. It doesn't have to be a strategy anymore. There's no more battle to win. Camilla laced her fingers through his. Which means any decision we make now will be for ourselves, not out of necessity. Raphael's eyes shone with an emotion that Camilla now clearly recognized as love, not the instantaneous kind of love from fairy tales, but the deeper, more lasting love that grows slowly, nourished by respect, admiration, and shared choices. I choose you, he said simply. I choose you, Aurora and Daniel, the family we've built together day after day. A week later, the garden of the Anderson mansion had been transformed. Fairy lights hung from the trees, creating an ethereal scene in the twilight. Round tables, set out on the lawn, accommodated close friends and co-workers. In the center, beneath an arch of white flowers, Camilla and Raphael exchanged wedding vows, not grandiose promises of eternal love, but realistic commitments to partnership, respect, and daily building. Daniel, elegant in his dark suit, stood beside his father as best man, Aurora in his arms. Sophia watched the ceremony from a respectful distance, her face reflecting a complex mix of emotions, joy at her son's happiness, nostalgia for what might have been, hope for what still might be. Teresa, momentarily abandoning her usual formality, let out discreet tears as she adjusted Camilla's simple veil. You look beautiful, the housekeeper whispered, a rare compliment that made Camilla smile broadly. The ceremony was brief and intimate. When the judge pronounced them man and wife, the applause of the guests seemed to echo beyond the garden, as if the old house itself was celebrating this new beginning. During the reception, as the guests chatted animatedly, Camilla stepped away, for a moment, seeking a moment of stillness to take in everything that had happened. She found refuge on the garden bench, the same one where Daniel had shared his memories months ago, where their journey had truly begun. It was there that Sophia found her, approaching with hesitant steps. "Can I join you?" she asked her, cautious tone revealing that she still felt like an intruder in the space. Camilla nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. The two women remained silent for a few moments, watching the party from a distance. "I want to thank you," Sophia said, finally, "for giving my son what I couldn't, Stability, acceptance, a sense of belonging. Camilla turned to face her. Daniel built his own strength. I just helped him recognize it. Still, Sophia paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, when we make choices driven by fear, we don't realize how devastating they can be to the ones we love. I thought... Her voice trailed off. I thought I was protecting Daniel, when really I was just protecting myself from the possibility of seeing him suffer. Camilla understood in that moment that forgiveness can come in unexpected ways, not as a grand dramatic gesture, but as small moments of shared understanding. The important thing is that you're back, she replied softly, and you're willing to rebuild. A movement on the lawn caught both of their attention. Daniel was walking toward them, his cane moving confidently over the familiar terrain, Aurora held in his other arm. I found you by your perfume, he announced with a smile. Someone needs their mother urgently, and I'm not talking about Aurora. Camilla laughed, standing up to greet her daughter. Hungry at the same time every day, at least she's predictable. Sophia watched the interaction with a shy smile. When Daniel unexpectedly extended his hand toward her, she accepted it with evident surprise. Raphael is looking for both of them, he explained. Something about the first toast and traditions that need to be followed. The three of them walked back to the party, an image that would have seemed impossible just a few months ago. The son leading the mother who had abandoned him, the woman who had arrived in despair now carrying her daughter with confidence, all connected by new choices that were beginning to heal old wounds. The evening progressed in celebration. Music was played, toasts were made, stories were shared. When Daniel surprised everyone by sitting down at the piano to play the song he had composed for Aurora, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, when most of the guests had left, Camilla and Raphael danced slowly under the garden lights. Aurora slept peacefully in the arms of Teresa, who had proudly assumed the role of step-grandmother. Daniel and Sophia talked quietly near the piano, rebuilding bridges with patience and honesty. "Happy?" Raphael asked, his eyes reflecting the small lights in the garden. Camilla looked around, at her sleeping daughter, at the teenager who had become almost like a son to her, at the house that had become a true home. Then she turned her gaze to the man whose arms wrapped around her so securely. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head on his chest. "Who would have thought a newspaper ad circled in red would bring me here?" "Fate works in mysterious ways," Raphael commented, gently kissing her forehead. "It wasn't just fate," Camilla corrected. "It was choices. Yours, mine, Daniel's. We chose to build this together day after day, even when it seemed impossible." In a corner of the garden, Aurora woke up briefly, her little eyes opening to the world full of lights and sounds. Teresa murmured sweet words, lulling her back to sleep. Daniel, noticing the moment, smiled in the direction of the sound. Sophia watched everything with teary eyes, recognizing the value of the second chance she had been given. And under the stars, in the center of the garden that had witnessed so many changes, Camilla and Raphael continued their slow dance, marking the rhythm of a life they had chosen to share. Not out of necessity or convenience, but out of love, that feeling that grows silently when two people decide, day after day, to build something greater than themselves. "To our future," Raphael whispered, sealing the promise with a soft kiss. "For our family," Camilla added, knowing that no matter what challenges came their way, they would face them together, not as perfect fairy tale characters, but as real people with scars and imperfections, choosing to walk side by side through the complexities of life. The next morning, the sun rose over the Anderson mansion, illuminating not just an old house with its imposing architecture, but a home, a place where love had finally found